Jungkook's eyes narrowed as he watched his prey entangled with ropes right in front of his eyes, his hateful eyes. He covered his prey's face with the black cloth. For a few seconds, he just stared at it because he had waited so long for this moment. To think about kidnapping his enemy's most precious thing, his daughter, seemed to be an impossible task. But he himself, as a mafia, can get anything once he sets his eyes on it. He's thinking about all the brutal ways to torture her and making her beg for her life before killing her. And he will film himself doing all of that for at least a year and send one video per day to her father. He was so excited, he thought he could do this when he himself never in his life played or wronged a woman, especially an innocent one. But after what Vian's father did to his sister, Susie, after he made her his mistress for several months, tortured her, stabbed her once every day, and still asking her to dance in front of him in that condition, Jungkook thought he could do the same with Vian. Jungkook scoffed as he came out of his thoughts and got up his seat to pull off the clothes from her face, ordering his man to throw water on her for her to wake up. Vian's eyes flickered as the blur vision in front of her came to life. Vian looked around and tried to move her hands, but she noticed that she couldn't move them because of the ropes. She immediately panicked and looked in front of her to find the greatest enemy of her dad, Jungkook, right in front of her face. Her hands stopped trying to get rid of the ropes. Vian's eyes widened as she looked at Jungkook, smirking on her face. Jungkook, surprised to see me? His devil voice echoed in her ears, sending shivers down her spine. Well, make it normal, because you're going to be here for a long time, until your death. He whispered, until your death, in her ears. Her heart skipped a beat for a moment, but it came down to natural, as at this point she was immune to feeling any emotions. Vian in turn smiled, a weak smile which was seen by Jungkook, and it infuriated him. Jungkook, why are you smiling? You still think your dad is gonna save you? I will never let that. Get it over with, she whispered while looking down, her voice barely audible. Jungkook stared at her in confusion as she looked up in his eyes, his empty devil eyes, and said, get it over with and kill me. She said with no emotions on her face, as if she was literally waiting for her death. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. He abducted her to torture her, but she is not even scared of him. Jungkook took a deep breath and said to her, Jungkook, well, I will surely kill you, but after I'm done playing with you. Jungkook smirked and ordered his man to open up her ropes. Jungkook, some things are done best when your hands are also included. Let's start counting your days until your death. Jungkook's man started opening the notes and Vian scoffed. Every man is same at the end. The only emotion, the only change in her face expressions until now was that scoff that she gave him. At what? At her about to be played? Jungkook stopped at his place when he heard her. He wasn't this kind of person. He never had a girl in front of him as a spray. What happened? He didn't want to do this. No matter what he did to his sister, he could take revenge from him. This is not the right way. He tried to ignore his thoughts and emotions To focus on the plan, Jungkook. Not everyone is the same. Some are forced to be like this. Vine swallowed as he came closer to her, pulled her up, making her stand by holding her wrist. She couldn't even stand properly, so she fell on him. And before getting angry, he was surprised. It was just a few hours that she didn't eat or drink water. Then why is she feeling so weak? Thinking she must be acting, Jungkook pushed her away by holding her shoulders as tightly as she could, making her groan in pain. The more he looked at her in pain, he thought he would be happy, but he immediately left her and took a step back. Vine staggered, but she somehow managed to stand straight. Jungkook looked at his hands for a few minutes as he remembered his sister's face. His eyes grew darker, and he took out his phone and ordered his assistant to make a video of them. Then he looked at her and smirked, tried to act as if he was enjoying this time. He came close to her and took off her shirt while she tried her best to resist it, to stop it, but her efforts were in vain. He took off her shirt and ran his hand across her bare back, making her want to throw up as he was about to take off her bra. But he noticed something irregular. He moved behind her back and his eyes widened as he saw her back filled with scars and burn marks, and all of them were pretty big. It was almost equivalent to the amount of scars he himself had, and he remembered every second of it, about how painful it was. To think that something similar happened to her as well, made his heart skip a beat. His eyes widened and he stared at them for a few seconds with a melted heart. Jungkook, what what happened to you? Vine took her shirt from the floor in anger and covered her back with it. Why do you care? Jungkook moved in front of her and held her shoulders, looking into her eyes for answers. Jungkook, I asked, what happened to you? Vine looked back in her eyes, the eyes that a few seconds ago were empty, filled with so many emotions in a second. Vine swallowed, looking into his eyes. Who are you? Jungkook, what? Vine, I asked, who are you to ask me such a question? I am not your slave, Vine said loudly on his face. Jungkook slowly left her shoulders. Getting angry, he pushed her on the chair and leaned down towards her face. He dug his face in her neck as she screamed and slapped him and what not. But he opened his mouth after getting to her neck. But he stopped in an instant before his lips touched her. He moved away from her and snatched his phone from his assistant's hands. Jungkook, lock her in the guest room and let her wear her shirt, he said and stormed inside his bedroom in extreme anger. He threw his phone on the bed and eventually threw himself on the bed as well. Putting a hand on his forehead, he was cursing himself for doing this. But then he remembered his enemy's face and his sister's innocent face at the same time. He growled, and it was so loud that it echoed in the whole house as he got up and started throwing things from the dressing table on the ground. After a few seconds, he looked in the mirror, putting his both hands on the counter, his eyes raging and his hands bleeding. He looked himself in the eyes and knew, no matter what happened to his sister, he couldn't do this to the innocent Vine. He will have another way to take revenge. he decided, as his fists clenched without realizing. Vine went inside the guest room, holding her dear life, her shirt, in her hand. After entering, she immediately laid on the bed without any expressions whatsoever. She wasn't angry, didn't swear at anyone. She just looked at somewhere with no emotions in her eyes. Next morning, Jungkook ignored thinking about Vine as much as he could, and he still didn't know what he was going to do with her. He just got ready and went to his work and returned at night. Vine opened the door of her room a little, only to see Jungkook sitting on the couch, getting himself wasted with the drinks while his shirt was blood red. Vine at that time thought, why wasn't anyone calling a doctor for Jungkook? He was badly hurt but still thinking at the same time. She kept looking at him when Jungkook noticed her and looked at her. She felt a shiver in her spine as he looked at her, and their eyes got locked. Vine was about to go inside when Jungkook said to her, "Come here." She stopped and did as he said because she knew it would be good for herself. She slowly came to him and he ordered her, "Sit down. I won't hurt you." She quietly sat down away from him and watched him gulp one glass of alcohol after another. She was worried about him at this point, but she didn't say anything. Finally, after a few minutes, Jungkook asked her, "You know why you're here?" He asked in a low tone without looking at her. Vine didn't hesitate. "Because my father is your enemy and you want to take over him." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. "You don't know about my sister?" Vine, "You have a sister?" Jungkook scoffed. "So he didn't tell even you about it." Vine, "What do you mean?" Jungkook gulped down another glass of alcohol as he told her about his sister. Vine's eyes widened and her heart shattered into pieces after listening. She was about to throw up, thinking all of this was done by her own father. She put a hand on her heart, clutching her shirt hardly as she had difficulty breathing. She was having an anxiety attack. Jungkook ignored it at first, but then he saw that she was barely breathing. "Vine, Vine, are you okay?" Jungkook asked her, but she didn't reply. He ordered his men to get medicine for her while he came towards her. He held her cheeks in his hands, making her look at him. "Jungkook, Vine, look at me. Look here. You want to come out of this, right? Name 3 things that you see in front of you." Vine tried to look, but her eyes closed down. Jungkook shook her up, making her open his eyes. "Jungkook, trust me, Vine. Tell me, what do you see in front of you?" Vine, "You." Jungkook nodded. "And?" Vine, "The alcohol and the wall." Jungkook smiled without realizing. "Good. You're doing good, Vine. Now name 3 things you hear." Vine breathed heavily as she said, "Your voice, the fan, and the steps of that man," she said, looking at Jungkook's assistant, who was coming towards them with the medicine. By then, she was already half calmed, or more than that, but she didn't realize. Jungkook took the medicine from his hand and fed Vine from his own hands, making her drink water after it. She finally took a deep breath and looked around her. Jungkook also came into his senses and looked at his hands. What the hell was he doing? He blinked a few times and sat on the couch again, at his place. Jungkook, you okay now? Wine took a few breaths before nodding once, as she was processing what had happened just now. Wine, you know it so well. How to relieve an anxiety attack. Jungkook scoffed. My sister was like you. She would have an anxiety attack after hearing gunshots in the house or seeing me drenched in blood. She hated everything related to me, but she still loved me. Wine didn't even know what to speak at this moment. Saying sorry was not enough. Nothing can avenge the way his sister died. Wine was hesitating, but she asked him finally, Why? Then why didn't you do anything to me? You had the perfect chance to take revenge, right? Jungkook smiled. I don't know. Vine's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest for him, her eyes swelling with tears. Jungkook, maybe I'm just not that kind of a person? He scoffed. It's getting late. I should sleep. I have work tomorrow. Jungkook got up after saying that, but Vine immediately followed him and held his index finger from the back, making him turn to her. Vine, get treated before you sleep. You're bleeding so much, she said while looking down, and she herself doesn't know why the hell she was asking him to get treated. Maybe she felt bad for him after that 5-minute talk. Or maybe Jungkook. And what about you? Why do you have so many scars on your back? Vine's eyes widened after hearing that question, and she left his finger, feeling emotionless once again as she remembered her past. To be continued.